Bruce's Florida harvest of tomatoes and onions is a great example of why we do this and what we have to look forward to this season. Hi, it's Saturday, and that means you and Garden Review. And I invite you to share what's going on in your garden so we can help celebrate your efforts and your successes. And while I'm in a holding pattern because the weatherman can't quite get his story straight, let's go on down to Texas and see what Mike and Linda have going on in their garden. Mike and Linda's deep mulch garden is well on its way. The potatoes, those squash, that garlic, your tomatoes, your onions, and the beans. Those are immaculate. And no weeds anywhere. That's another great testament to the deep mulch garden. Thank you, this is terrific. This week I did receive a couple questions about trellising, fencing, material, the cost of it, the setup, what works best, what doesn't work best. It really doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of ways around the barn. And this setup took me 5 years to get this far. One of the things, set up this new tomato trellis this year. You know, I like to use this string, but that's not how we started out, and that's not the only way to do it. Actually, a tomato is a vine. And we've had some great success when we didn't do anything and we just let it grow on the ground. That vine will root, and it makes plenty of tomatoes just laying on the ground. It just sprawls out everywhere. The reason I do it this way is you can get a lot more tomatoes packed a lot closer together. It's a lot more work. You have to prune the suckers out. You got to keep that air flowing in there. But it does produce quite a bit of food. Every time the wind blows, this vibrates and it helps them pollinate. And that's what I found. But tomato rings work really well. If you stake them, they work even better. But there's all kinds of options. As far as trellising and fencing material, I guess I'm lucky because I drive in the country a lot, and anytime I see a sign that indicates a garage sale, a farmer's garage sale is a little different than in the city. And I usually ask whether or not they got any old fencing or whatnot, and they usually can pull something like this out of the weeds and they'll sell it to you for just a little bit of nothing. I've cobbled together everything that's out here. You don't have to spend a ton of money to do this. I just cannot wait to get out here and really start planting. Rick not only has a great layout, he is using several different rings and fencing material in his deep mulch rows and the beds, all providing utility and complementing the beautiful and healthy plants. Thank you, Rick. Your North Carolina garden is off to a great start. And just like the greenhouse, this is not a traditional building. I had some of these frames and I just kind of cobbled them together in a square building. Took me a little while to get this put together. I gathered materials where I could, and you may have seen what happened when I put sheet plastic over and all the trials and tribulations. But it takes a little while, and you can use just about whatever lumber I piecemealed together. Got free pallet wood, saved the containers, so you don't have to put a lot of resources in to grow a lot of food. Art has a real good example of that. He did start his garden, but then got called off for weather. He asked me a question, do I know what's under the tent? What's under the tent looks like your ingenuity to germinate and protect those seedlings until it warms up enough you can actually plant out the garden. Art, that's wonderful. And so you don't actually have to have a see-through greenhouse. And Art, spring is coming. But look at this forecast. The weatherman can't quite get their timing right. But it could be worse. Denise is a regular contributor and is just starting to plant out her raised beds. Our blessings to all that were affected. And we are glad that you and yours are all well.
That was not snow.
Your raised beds will be up and growing again soon. We're just glad you're okay. And Larry sent a cheerful shot of his North Carolina allspice. Beautiful. Thank you, Larry. We needed to be cheered up. We've got to make it just a couple more days. Our yellow zucchini is just now starting to get their second true leaves, but if we go too far into next week, these might get stressed when we replant them. You do want them in the ground before they get too far into their second true leaves. Jim, your green greens are growing really well. We're going to be excited to see how those turn out. And we've got an example of each type of sunflower that we planted. I expect more of these to germinate over the next couple days. And has anybody ever said you can't have enough beets? Where the voles ate out the potatoes, I got new ones planted and they're coming up. Our heavily mulched russet potatoes are starting to come up in the potato tower experiment. We just got to get them through the cold. And we've got some really good growth on the amaranth. These peas should be able to take the cold pretty well, and they're just about ready to grab on and start trellising up. And of course, this is different material than some of the other trellises I have. Speaking of different materials, let's go on down to Texas and see Valerie's container garden. The variety of plants is almost rivaled by the different containers and trellis ideas. You're getting Pontiac red potatoes already? That's amazing. Valerie, thank you for your inspiration. Your garden is truly blessed. And that's a great example of why we do what we do, is because it tastes great. Even though you said you weren't happy about how your red carrots did, I'll bet you they tasted better than any store-bought carrots ever. And for everybody out there that's never eaten ripened peas straight out of your own garden, you don't know what peas taste like. Please leave a comment down below and let everybody know just how much you appreciate them sharing what's going on in their garden. And I do invite you to send in a few shots so that we can celebrate what you're doing in your garden. Now, I called this an arch, but it doesn't really arch. Maybe in an imagination. But, point is, this is just a piece of wire I got at a sale. My wife goes, "Why are you dragging that junk home?" When you stretch it out over a couple rusty pipes you bring home from the sale. Now it becomes a trellis. And I can just imagine cucumbers or beans or tomatoes just hanging down, walking through, picking them. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see what we get. Like I say, there's a lot of ways around the barn, and we'd love to see what you're doing in your garden. This is where we get ideas, this is where we get inspiration, and this is where I get motivation to come out here every day, even when the weatherman throws me a curveball. Our beets are going to seed nicely, and I'm itching to take apart these cold frames. After all, these cabbages do need a little bit of room. You believe we planted those in December? You can do this too. Gotta love butterflies in the garden. And until next time, remember, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and God bless you. Come on, let's plant.
Let's go plant garden.